Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are going to unpack a biblical prophecy that has been a source of fascination and a lot of debate for literally centuries.
We're diving deep into the book of Daniel, into a passage that some believe isn't just an ancient text, but a precise, detailed timeline for world history, one that stretches from ancient Babylon right up to the very end of the age.
So, let's get right into it. The interpretation we're looking at today sees this 70 weeks prophecy as something much bigger than a single prediction. Think of it more like a master key, a framework that supposedly unlocks all of biblical prophecy and shows how history is meant to unfold. Okay, so this message was given to the prophet Daniel way back when he was in exile in Babylon, and it lays out this very specific time frame of 77s. And during that time, 6 huge redemptive things were supposed to be accomplished for Israel and Jerusalem.
So, what on earth does 77s actually mean? It sounds pretty cryptic, right? Let's break down how this prophetic language gets translated into a real concrete timeline.
Right, so here's the first big piece of the puzzle. According to this interpretation, we're not talking about literal 7-day weeks. No, in this kind of prophetic language, 1 week is actually a code for a period of 7 years.
And that leads us to the crucial math. You take those 70 units, multiply them by 7 years each, and you get a total timeline of 490 years. This number, 490, is the absolute foundation for this entire prophetic framework.
So the clock starts ticking from a real, verifiable, historical event, the decree to rebuild Jerusalem in 445 BC. From that exact point, the prophecy says to count forward 69 of those weeks, which is 483 years. And that count supposedly leads directly to the arrival and then the cutting off of the Messiah. But wait, that's only 69 weeks. What happened to the 70th?
And that question is where things get really interesting, because not everybody reads this timeline the same way. Before we get to that final week, you have to know there are several major schools of thought on how to interpret this whole thing.
You've basically got 3 main camps. First, there's the traditional view, which says everything in the prophecy was fulfilled historically, wrapped up by the year 70 AD. Then you have the symbolic view, which says, hey, these numbers aren't literal, they're figurative. And finally, you have the eschatological view, the one we're focused on today, which argues that yes, the first 483 years are in the past, but that final 7-year week, that's still to come.
And this brings us to the most debated and, according to this interpretation, the most critical part of the whole prophecy, that final 70th week. The idea here is that after the events of that 69th week, after the 483 years were up, someone hit a giant pause button on the prophetic clock. This created a massive, undefined gap in the timeline, an interval between the end of the 69th week and the start of the 70th.
Now, in this theological framework, this giant pause is, well, it's our current era. It's often called the church age. It's the period we are living in right now, separating the historical events of the first 69 weeks from the future events of that final week.
So this pause also sets the stage for a dramatic contrast between 2 key figures. First, the prophecy talks about the anointed one, the Messiah, who appears and is cut off. But then it introduces a totally different figure, a prince to come, who is the one to kick off the events of that final 70th week. They're set up as complete opposites.
So what happens when that prophetic clock supposedly starts ticking again? Well, the source lays out a very specific sequence. It all starts when this future ruler makes a 7-year treaty. But right in the middle, at the 3.5-year mark, he breaks it. He desecrates the temple and launches a period of terrible persecution, often called the tribulation, which only ends with his own final judgment. Okay, so why does all this matter? Why is this one interpretation of one prophecy considered such a big deal, a cornerstone for everything else?
Because in this view, the 70 weeks prophecy isn't just some standalone prediction. No, it's seen as the detailed fulfillment of the very first promise of redemption given in the entire Bible, way back in the book of Genesis.
You see, this ancient verse from Genesis is framed as the original prophecy of a cosmic conflict. The Messiah's suffering, being cut off, is seen as the strike to his heel. But his ultimate victory at the very end of the 70th week, when he judges that final ruler, is the crushing of the head. The 490-year timeline just provides the when and the how for this ancient promise. And that is why this is seen as so compelling to so many. It's not just about dates and timelines. It tries to tie the entire biblical narrative together into one single cohesive story of redemption, from that very first promise all the way to the final kingdom.
So ultimately, this way of reading Daniel's 70 weeks presents it as something far more than a vague prediction. It's presented as a precise roadmap, a timeline claiming to connect the ancient past, explain our present moment, and detail what is still to come. And that leaves all of us to wonder about its pretty profound implications.